So first I'll just introduce our critiquers. So these are professional artists. They each own their own galleries in Rockport. So Susan Lynn came here and did a watercolor demonstration for us, so you may have seen her before. And her gallery is called the Susan Lynn Gallery and Studio. Well, it's good branding. And John Caglione is her husband, and he has a different gallery down the street. And so next time you're in Rockport, visit both of their galleries and studios. When you're working on something in your gallery, do you let people kind of look over your shoulder?
Not generally, no. I have my studio space kind of in the back of my gallery, so it's behind some screens. So I'm available, but I don't really want people tripping over my stuff and sticking their elbows in wet paint, so,
So Susan does both watercolor, as she demonstrated, but she also does oils, and John focuses on oils. Susan was an architectural illustrator, which I didn't know, and of course, who is she?
it was a while ago.
And she does both plein air and studio painting. John does oils primarily, as I mentioned, and he's a graduate of the Pratt Institute, which I don't think it exists anymore, does it?
Yes, it is.
It does? Oh, okay. Somebody knows. And I think they're here to provide you with some observations and comments and critique. And I think it's great that all of you came out. Not everybody brought painting, that's okay, because I think I always learn from watching other people's critiques as much as my own. So the way it'll work is that we'll put one on the easel. It's a sturdy easel, don't worry. And if you would like to ask the critiquers about something in particular that you have a question on, you have that opportunity. And if not, then they can just look at it, do it. So are you going to be able to see from there, or do you want?
I'll show you the other.
Or do you want to sit there? Okay.
You see, here's the other view.
Okay, so if
So we'll
that's.
have both
But
views.
I think.
I'm gonna look at the real thing.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Elise if we could take those two seats, and if Elise can you sit over here, and that way they can see the actual art.
Okay, and maybe jumping up,
Yeah,
going
I
back
think
and
that
forth
makes
to point at them.
And then.
Okay.
And so each person has about 3 minutes. John is going to be our timer, so that is fair, because we want to make sure we get to everybody. And after we've done one, then we'll go back, and if you brought a second, if there's time. We've got a big crowd, bigger than normal, so we might not get to your second one, but if there's time, we'll try. And your second one might be a little bit shorter critique.
It'll just be a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Okay.
And you can sit in my seat, you can see better. Okay, so I think that's the setup.
Okay.
And any questions for anybody before we start? Okay, this one happens to be here. This was our test for setting up, so let's start with this one. And it's Keith's.
Keith, what is the medium?
Medium is oil pastel with watercolor pencil. No, with regular pencil, oily pencil.
Okay.
Oh, right.
And are you concerned about any particular aspect of it, or
I'm sorry.
are you concerned about any particular aspect? Do you have anything you would concentrate
My
on?
wife disagrees with the green spot of the water. I think it is fine, but it was sort of a mistake, so maybe she's right.
I'm not saying a word. The key word was you mentioned your wife.
Tread lightly. Well, I think it's nicely composed. The way you have the main figure looking toward the other figures, it really leads you in. That's well done. There's a little problem with depth, reading the depth between those figures. If you can, you've got nice, bright, intense colors on that foreground figure. You might need to mute those distant ones even a little more. And there's a little dissonance in the way you're handling the medium as far as the feel of the water here. It's very nice, but you've handled it completely differently than the way you're handling it on the rest of it, so it doesn't quite match.
That was my mistake, that I messed it up in the green area and couldn't get it back.
So, but you can make that work. You can bring some of that up into the trees, bring some of that, you know, maybe create some blurred ripples on the water. You could make those things meld together. Did you have?
Well, similar to what Susan is saying. And she was talking about I like the stepping into it and it drawing us to the back. That's the strength of the painting, and aside from it being a good composition, by the way. I also have a problem with this area. It's not pushed back. It looks like it's almost on top of them. Now, visually, we know that it's back further, but, you know, I would have also continued to, as long as this happened, they're happy mistakes. I would have continued that, and it's easier on the eye. And then when you come up here, it can be more fractured. But I would have made a transition to that area.
That was 3 minutes, just for a sense of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
All right,
can go on.
but can people in the back here, because they're facing this way? Okay, all right, it's hard. What
Okay.
if we move your chair so that you're right here so you can see it close up, and then you're sort
Well,
of
they were
facing
looking at it
them?
from the side.
Yeah, we don't mind getting up.
Okay,
We'll try to
is
talk
that
try
okay?
to
You don't
speak to
want,
the
I don't want to make you go up and down.
That was more just for every
Oh.
All right, I'm just gonna grab one thing. All right, that one.
And this belongs to,
Side.
Yes?
and anything you want us to particularly comment on?
Well, it's called Leaving Gaza, and I'm just trying to make a statement about what was going on.
Just here. So I like what you're doing with the color and the subtlety of it, and the, you know, the sort of teetering between, excuse me, realism and abstraction. I think the weakness of it is the composition, because we're going right dead center and then stopping right there. You're not pulling us around. What do you think?
Well, a lot of the same comments. I do like the looseness of it. It's, you know, a little playful as well. I mean, it's not the great, you know, playful and looking at your objective here is a dissonance, obviously, but it is kind of playful. I like the way you handled your figures. Other than that, I just have to agree with what Susan has said.
I have one question that bothered me, was on the bottom right. Is that, you know, the figure on the bottom right? Yes. Are you okay with that, or should that be more subtle, or should I?
I'm okay with it because I know it's a figure, maybe it's more pronounced. Well, that's fine. It brings us forward. You know, there's well, Richard Schmidt does it. A good painter friend of ours, Mark Boges, does it. In his case, when he's doing a landscape, he has usually a prominent tree in the front, and you have that push forward and back, you know, that tension. So it gives it depth automatically. In this case, it brings us forward. And again, we know it's a figure, number one, because you have the repeated motifs as you recede into the painting. So it doesn't bother me.
No, I'm fine with it too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right, watercolor.
Whose is this? Oh,
Mainly a watercolors, I have another oil there that's wet as well. So this was a very complicated setup, I did not set this still life up. And then when I started to paint it, I felt there was too much going on in the setup, somebody else set it up. So I paint very quickly, very wet and wet. There you have it.
I love the way you're handling the paint and the color. Really beautiful. And, you know, these little delicate washes where you've got layering of color there, really nice. Same here. I don't know what you want me to look at. And
Tell me about the complicated setup and composition. I should have edited more, I think.
So my first thought in looking at this, what I would have done in approaching this to simplify things is to find a way to tie some of this busyness to the background. So maybe go a darker value and let this kind of disappear into the background. You don't always have to paint what's in front of you.
Yes.
Playing with values is a really important part of creating what you want.
Right.
So yes, it's a busy, and I don't know where the focal point is supposed to be. That seems like an obvious choice, because this is all a unified sort of subject, and you've got something unique over here. So I would say play with the values, see where you can let things sort of bleed together, kind of like what you're doing here, but tie it into bigger masses. Like tie it into the background. This could be a big shape here. You could get more contrast behind that and make that a real centerpiece. That would be my suggestion.
Yes.
Take it
All right.
but beautifully done.
On the other hand, it's handled nicely, and I like the sense of light in it, and you kept your colors clean, which in watercolor is very difficult. Well, it's difficult in oils as well, depending on how much you work on a piece. And you know, you're not afraid to, well, for you it was trying to get through it, but I like the fact that you made this nice and loosey-goosey here. But then we come to what Susan has said, and that would be the totality of it.
Okay, you're gonna have to go first on this one. You just said, yeah, what she said.
Yeah, what she said. Is that a...
that helpful?
Again.
I don't want
I
to.
wish I could put it up higher. Nope.
Whose work is this? And? And David, what were you looking to do?
I was looking to get some feedback from you guys.
That's a mistake.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to capture the atmosphere, sort of a cool, foggy morning, and I laid down a wash, an early wash. I was trying to be looser so that I don't get hung up in detailing things. So I was pushing that. I guess if I had a question, it would be the foreground on the right. Seems sort of empty there. I don't know. Happy to hear what you have to say.
Okay. How long did you work on this piece, by the way? Quick?
A couple of hours, maybe.
Couple hours. you know, empty space is fine. It's a matter of what you do with it as a unifying element. Well, you have gotten your foggy effect. You know, it is very loose and soft. But I have to say that each of these elements is not tying in with the rest of it. Now, as you recede to the background, this is more believable than this. This is softer than these are. So it's saying, well, which comes before? And again, it's the elements are not just unifying together. So you have to think of that as you're trying to achieve this effect of fog and mist.
So I'm curious if there was something intentional you were doing with the color, because you have such a limited
Well,
color
yeah,
palette.
right. I was actually trying to practice using blossoms
Okay.
that I wanted to create rather than, oh, damn, I have a blossom.
And that's a very good thing, because those can be beautiful, or they can kill the whole thing. I think John is right. As far as the atmospheric perspective, you need to have those gradient layers of values. So this value is way too strong. Yeah, this value is way too strong, because that wants to leap forward, so everything is kind of flattening. But you did handle, you know, this value transition really nicely. I would also say this is much too strong. This looks like a bright sunny day sky. Instead of that, also should recede and soften. Yeah, I think mostly it's a value structure thing that you need to focus on if you want to get that atmospheric effect.
Thank you.
Sure.
It's all together.
This is the whole thing.
Okay, I think one person brought these. Which one would you like first? Robin, which one?
I guess the seascape.
Put that up on the ledge, kinda, so we can see the whole thing. And did you have, whose was this, sorry? Did you have any particular questions, or?
No, not a particular question. It's something that I just worked on and kind of put aside, and then thought, should I come back and try to work on it more? to bring
Was
it
this
to-
a studio or plein air?
I think I painted that from a photo.
From a photo, okay. Overall, I think it's lovely, actually. I like how you're handling your colors and your wave action there, that's nice. This tree, to me, is problematic. Having that point come touch the edge, you know, meeting like that is distracting, but also a little too much symmetry and sameness. Every branch is the same, every brushstroke is the same all the way through. Nature doesn't do sameness, and that's like the hardest thing to teach your brain, is not to just keep repeating brushstrokes, colors, patterns. We all do that automatically. That's how our brains like to organize what we see. So you really have to make a conscious effort to break it up and mush it apart. You know, the way that you've got soft and hard edges through here, you should have soft and hard edges through here as well.
Do you think the tree's too big?
Well, as I said, that that one thing coming to the exact edge is problematic. I would maybe just take it down to there. I don't think that doesn't bother me, the size of it. I think it probably could use a little more value.
I'm impressed that you did this from a photo, because most people, how long have you been painting?
Oh, on and off for years.
Okay. Most people use photos, you know, you can see it's a photo, from a photo. And you know, it's usually flat. You have some nice aerial perspective in this. I do have a problem with the tree, and it's not so much as a tree in there as, and of course, yes, the values, as long as you're going to use this tree motif, but the shape of it, and I'm not sure what it's doing for the painting. You do need something like a tree, for instance, to break this up. Maybe I would have had it thinner, and maybe a couple of thinner trunks, and more air through your form, and not just sky holes, so to speak, or holidays as we also call them, but just a space between these, and enough of a form to break up the composition, but not to dominate it in the way it is here, because you have a lot of other nice things going on. One other thing. And then think of your, it's soft, it's acceptable, but you know, start thinking of your aerial perspective, and there would be changes in values and somewhat in color as you recede to the background. Because this blue, gray blue, it's the same value basically throughout. And it's not to say that there aren't times when there's just one value, but it's just another way to maybe improve the painting.
Well, that one is mine.
And what's the title? This has to have a title.
It is just snow monkeys.
Me and my shadow.
Spa day.
So they're in a hot spring. And that's
Well, I think it's whimsical. It's nice, and it's simple palette. I'm not sure about the solidity of this line. I would probably have broken it up a little bit more, made it softer in places. It's a very solid line there. But I love the playfulness of it. And Susan, watercolor.
Well, I think my first thought is edges, that it would be nice to see some, as I had referenced before, some soft edges and hard edges. That just makes it more visually interesting. Pretty much everything is a hard edge, you know, this in particular. Compositionally, it might have been more interesting if you'd actually cropped it in a little tighter.
Okay.
Because this isn't really telling us much. It isn't really adding to the narrative, and this is a very narrative piece. But Yeah, that's charming.
Whose is this?
Sorry, it's mine.
Oh.
What motivated you to take it?
There's a wolf.
Well, I had just done the trip to see it with the family and stuff, so anything I paint, it's usually something about the family, so this is just a trip that we did together.
A memory, yes.
So in the it's from a photograph. In the photograph, the kids are all there, but it was overwhelming my ability to do all that. So I did 2 monkeys instead of 5.
Well, the monkeys are well rendered.
And you're right, the narrow parrot. There's only 4 colors that I used, and when I was finished, I thought, it doesn't really pop to me. It's just sort of sitting there, but.
Yeah, and that's also controlling values, as we're going to keep talking about. Learning to get a little gradation, even in a condensed space like that.
Okay.
Things will be lighter, they fade away as they go into the distance, so your strongest values in the foreground, let things soften. That blue is consistent all the way through. There's no depth to it. It stands up.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, new pastel. Morris, did you have anything?
Any particular things you want to address? No. All right. Your composition is starting out really nice here. I mean, that's really just beautifully rendered. Those rocks are gorgeous. And then we get to this. You've got a hard line right through the middle of the piece. And then hard lines across here. So, yeah, and I understand it's what you're looking at, but you can fiddle with things. You could create, bring some of that dark and break that up. Can pull this winding edge up a little. Can kind of create some interruptions in those things, in those hard lines coming across. I would say if it were possible to lift that up a little higher, so that you don't have it cutting right through the center, that would be helpful. But wow, that's really beautiful right there.
Oh yeah, this light is not doing this piece justice. It's very nice. But yes, if you raise that up, and then I would have broken these, what I presume like a pink loosestrife or some kind of reeds. I would have broken them up a little bit to get more of a feel of it, and I would have made some pronounced and others remained soft. And since you define down here, that's good. I may have put a little bit of more accent, not too much, but accents in the back too, to give this area more shape, but not so much that it comes forward and becomes the main attraction, you might say. Nice piece.
Very nice. So I'm curious, do you consider that finished, or is it you're still in progress? Okay, so you got lots to. No. Okay. What's the medium on this one?
Oh.
digital art.
Digital. Okay. Did you have any particular things you want us to?
Well, my biggest problem with that, this is a little stream near my home out in northwestern Pennsylvania. And it flows into a crazy lake called Shoot the Cat, which I haven't figured out yet. But the light during the day and going into the evening would blank out the background. It would keep, and I was using an airbrush with different tones of light, trying to get the effect without killing everything, and just wondered if there were any suggestions, because it took me about 2 weeks to put this together. I do it digitally, it's a little different. I used about 8 different types of brushes, plus an airbrush.
Wow.
But trying to get the lighting the way I wanted, I had trouble.
Well, first of all, there's no time limit on working on a piece. It just has to be successful and take you 1 day or 1 hour or
A year.
10 days or a year. Doesn't matter.
It came from a
It's
black
the
and
result.
white photo, a little tiny photo.
Little black and white photo?
Yeah, a little tiny one I had from the 30s.
I don't know if it's this light or not, but you know, this stands out. You have very pleasing colors, by the way. They're very soothing, very sweet, and I mean in a positive way. I'm losing it here. There's not enough contrast. I'm taking this part of the foreground. So,
I changed that 4 times.
well, guess what's coming next?
And that's very tricky, because generally you want to, it's easy if you've got something dark in the foreground to create that depth. You've got those pretty pink, pale pink, right in the foreground, so that contrast and creating that depth is difficult. I would suggest that maybe, see how it's reading here,
Yeah,
but not as well here? The gray contrasts and creates a little more depth there. It may be gray down these reds a little bit.
okay.
They're a little too warm. They're warmer than the pinks. That's a very cool pink. So playing with your color temperature
Yeah.
could make a big difference. It's very pretty. This bright spot here is a little distracting to me, because this is where my eye wants to be.
So it should be a little more faded.
But yeah, maybe, yeah, just break it up a little more, maybe just not quite so contrasty there. Really interesting piece though.
Yeah, love the ethereal nature of it.
Oh, the tablet? Yes, it's just leaving up there.
This is it.
Barbara's
Watercolor?
It's watercolor on Yuko.
On Yucca,
So it
okay.
was one of my very first experiments with finding out what watercolor did. A lot on its own. So
And in your mind, is it totally abstract, or is there a subject matter to this?
it kind of became, almost accidentally, a like indications of a little city or village or something in the midst of all the amorphous stuff.
Well, you know, that's actually where my mind went when I saw it. That I'm looking at like pieces of a maybe a garden and a residential sort of scape. It has sort of a landscape-ish feel, partly because of the color scheme. It's very well done. Very well done.
Thank you.
You know, again, compositionally, you gotta be careful. This is not quite in the center, but it's dangerously close. You're doing a nice job of moving our eye up through here. This is kind of a lot less interesting than this. So maybe a little more variation, maybe some more of the suggestions of verticals up here might kind of pull us together. This feels separate.
Okay.
Overall, I really
And
like
as
our
you know,
piece.
you
That's right. You can cheat like crazy with Yupo.
Yeah, well, I saw kind of something like structures and stuff as well. I think that this violet fights a little bit with this violet. But I love the idea, the solidity, and then there's this and representation, and then there's this abstract quality to it. Yes.
Well done.
Yeah.
Why don't we take our 15-minute break now?
Oh, and I'm gonna, would you spend a couple of minutes just talking about your own work? They
Sure.
brought samples of their work.
Cool. Can we do that now or after?
Maybe now, while
It's
everybody's,
heavy, be careful.
before everybody jumps up.
Get out far enough to get it.
I apologize for the light there. We worked really hard to get rid of them and we couldn't quite do it.
Well, that's really not a terribly accurate representation. So this is one of my watercolors. I paint both plein air and in the studio. I did a plein air event last summer in Easton, Maryland, and the property where I was staying had this 150-year-old barn that the owners had restored. It was an old mule barn, empty, but just magical. The light coming in through those cracks and crevices all over the place. This is one I did in the studio later, working from photos and from my plein air studies. Usually when I'm in the studio, I don't want to just work from photographs. I like to have seen and experienced the subject with paint. You see a lot more if you get out there and paint from life. I would encourage you to do that every chance you get, even if you're not working that way for your final work, just to fuel your brain. So that was a combination of plein air and photo as reference matter. That's one of my oils. That was a studio piece. So I moved to Cape Ann 7 years ago
Something like that.
from the Midwest. So seascapes were just a whole new thing for me, and I just fell in love with them. I can't get enough of doing seascapes now, and mostly in oil. It just translates better to me in oil. Proud to say I'm now a signature member of the American Society of Marine Artists. So yeah, this is Cape Hedge Beach, which is not far from where we live. But that's good.
If this were reality TV, we'd have John do a critique of it. But
Well, I'll tell you, John and I critique each other's
I'm
work
sure you
all
do.
the time. This
Yeah.
is such a valuable thing that you guys do.
But I wouldn't dare do it in public.
we won't push it.
John is a very wise man.
And since I'm from the Midwest, Midwestern part of Brooklyn, that is. Obviously, where we live, I'm enamored with these subjects. But I do all sorts of landscapes. I love painting outside. This is near us. It's in Essex. It's at the Old Story Boatyard, or Burnham's Boatyard, as they now call it. And this piece began when I was doing Cape Ann Plein Air, and it was done outside, and it's just 90% ready-made, the materials you see up there. Obviously in oil, and I love playing with light and shadow. And I don't know where to stand here, sorry. And I love the shears of boats, and it tells a story, and there's a lot of history where we live. So I did change values in the paintings. I made this area darker as to emphasize the lights. You know, again, light and shadow, color. And it's generally how I work, you know. A little bit of palette knife in there, but mostly brush work. There was a period of time when I worked totally palette knife. I went from brushes to palette knives for about 10 years, or actually 16 years, and then I went back to brush work. But then I felt like, well, I need a little more dynamic strokes in there, and I take the palette knife again and put in various places, especially when you're dealing with rocks. And then I would modify those forms so that there's a consistency with some brush work to soften the palette knife work. Any questions?
Wait a minute. I'm going to comment on this just because I think it would be really valuable with regard to composition, because John is kind of a genius with composition. So there's something called the rule of thirds. Generally, you don't want to cut your painting in half vertically or horizontally. It's better if you put a hard line, a vertical or a horizontal, in the thirds. Where does this line up? On the third. Where is that? On the third. If you have a diagonal, your big shapes, you want a bigger and a lesser to create tension. This shadow area is one shape. It creates a tension with this big light area. So you've got this very dynamic sort of feeling going on there. And look at what he's doing with values. We've just been talking about creating depth with values. See how grayed out and soft those distant greens are, how rich and dynamic, vibrant these greens are. All the things we've been talking about. Look up close.
Well, thank you, that
All
was
right.
nice.
Thank you.
Not planned, but that was very nice of you to do that.
Yeah, so if we take about a 15-minute break, don't forget to buy your raffle tickets, and let's continue.
So this is Alan's.
Oh, Alan's, okay, good.
Whose piece is this? And is there something that you were trying to achieve here?
Well, we've been on vacation in Sequoia National Park, and I was trying to get the sense of the trees are just so massive from here to here that I wanted to kind of get that sense of the just massive trees.
Okay. Well, you've achieved that for sure. It's good that you have the related sizes of the figures and the trees themselves. There's a nice sense of light in this, and your color is, it's an interesting palette. I would have thought to have had a little more color up here, but you make it work. There's a coolness and then your massive trees. And I like the way you handled some of the highlights on the trees. The one thing I would have to say, and it's always the big no-no, is that in your quest to capture this, the massiveness of the trees and the feeling of height and of course age with these sequoias, you didn't think of that this tree is right in the middle. Should have just pushed it over to a side. And I would have put a little more color in the tree. I mean, these are in your other trees, even though there's more light on them. I would have, and you could still have this in shade, but a little more color in there. So, certainly if you wanted to work more in this painting, you could, and you could shift. But better to go on to the next painting and use this as a teacher.
We're just gonna take turns.
Okay.
If you've got something to, if you want to add something, feel free to click.
By the way,
Different. I'm gonna put, this is Devon's name tag on the back.
Who's Susan?
Oh, sorry.
And what are we working with here?
Um,
What's the medium?
can I stand or?
Sure.
I just gotta ask one thing. Usually when I go to critiques, I usually record, so do I have everybody's permission so I can do your critiques even if it's for 3 minutes?
Sure.
I'm gonna get my phone for sake of conference break.
So while you're doing that, you're working with, I'm guessing, acrylic or oil?
I'm working with acrylic paint, but I also work with different matte mediums.
Mm-hmm.
And the different matte mediums I worked with were basically what I'm working with were acrylic paint, coarse pumice, glass beaded gel was what I was working with, and then later on, what I originally was, the artwork was originally a painting, but then I added the matte medium on top of it, and then I went in with some acrylic ink over the acrylic paint, and from it I had the acrylic inks of copper, gold, and smidge bits of bronze and black ink together, and I swirled it with a different type of brush to get in the swirls a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically just would like to know the good, the bad, and ugly, what you guys think.
I think it's a really interesting and beautiful piece. To me, the foundation of every painting, whether it's abstract or representational, is composition. This has so much going on everywhere that it's not really leading me anywhere. You know, we want our eye to be led into a painting and around a painting and to be manipulated, to tell us where to look, to tell us where to go. I think it would be easy to remedy that with a little less of the shiny coppery gold. Because it's like too much everywhere. Whereas if you had some quiet places for your eye to rest, it would pull us through there a little more. But the overall feel of it is gorgeous. And I love what you're doing with the textures. That's really, really interesting.
And whose piece is this? Okay. Is there something that you were trying to achieve with this?
I'd like it to look more natural, but I haven't been at it very long, so I need a little advice. I know
All right.
the cloth under the vase looks fake, like, if I had more time, I was rushed, I would have more like shadows in it, wrinkles in it, the lines, like one line is, you know, curved sort of, the other one's too straight. Like, I think that needs major work.
Okay. Did you have to catch a train or something that you were rushed?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. So is this set up in
Yes.
your studio?
It was in an art class at a senior center,
Okay.
yeah.
And did they have light?
Not good enough.
Okay. So, you know, there's, I mean, to me, it's a primitive style at this point.
Yes.
And I like that, actually. However, since you told me you were trying to achieve these other things, you know, under your cloth, for instance, this is kind of like sitting in the air. You would have shadow somewhere, and if the light was coming this way, this would kind of be darker. You know, you should squint when you're looking at these things, at your objects, and not rush it. Better to have an unfinished piece than to rush it. You know, your flowers would have more variety in them. It's nice that you put it, you know, on a neutral background so that they do stand out, you know, to begin with. You mentioned these lines. So, you know, there's perspective, and everything goes to a vanishing point. You know, there's oftentimes a number of different vanishing points in a painting, but here it's straight on. So these actually would have started out here and come in further, not the other way around. Eventually you'll learn this, and you'll soften your edges, especially in the dark area, and you'll have what's called reflective light. You know, from if this was sitting on a white cloth, for instance, even though this is in shadow, and this should have had a little more shadow here, it will reflect light up into the dark area, and it'll be a subtle lightness in there. It's, again, reflective light, it's called. And this light, of course, would be your brightest, because the light is apparently coming from this way. Again, soften some lines. Everything doesn't have to be hard. It's a good effort, so keep doing it.
We got help here.
Thank you.
It's an operation getting this one out. Well, I don't know.
I think this will fall off. I don't tape it.
Do you have a board you can
just
put
take it
behind
up a
it?
little higher.
A little higher?
Yeah, because it's
I don't know that it'll
It's okay.
hold up.
That's why I was just gonna stick it on the front, but that's okay. Okay,
All right, is that straight?
there you go. It's mine. Acrylic.
Acrylic on, is it on
Canvas
canvas?
paper.
Oh, okay. And any questions or particular things you're aiming for here?
I've been advised to remove the person, but I think the person captures the insignificance of humanity, so that's why I'm leaving it in there. But other than that, I'm all, any input.
Well, you've actually done a really nice job with the atmospheric perspective on this and the light. You're handling your values really well. I would say it's a little hard to look at with that shadow on there. I would say that foreground mass, the rocks,
Yeah.
could be a little stronger. So you've gotten really fussy with these trees and trying to define each one. whereas you did some really nice loose brushwork up here, which needs to be flipped around. The fussy, the detail should only be in the immediate foreground. Things that you want to go off in the distance need to be done like this, which you did beautifully. The person probably needs to shift over a little compositionally. Is this a dog?
Yeah.
Get rid of the dog.
Maybe.
It's just that, I know, keep the person because that's your concept.
Yeah, yeah.
But the dog is just distracting and kind of evenly divided on the,
Yeah, yeah.
it's not working for a number of reasons, but overall, that's, yeah, it's a lovely effort. Nicely done.
Who's work? And it's acrylic, okay? From a photo?
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Well, I like the strength of the color, and you're kind of not afraid to apply it. What were you trying to achieve with this? Anything?
Color of this sign, I don't know.
All right. Well, here's the trick. The lines of, you know, very solid. I would have like varied those lines and made some softer, some hard. I would have done a little more accent areas to give these forms more shape. And I would have softened, not only softened this line, but I would have softened, again, I mentioned before with another painting, softened the, well, that's the seascape painting, that's right. Soften your color and value as you went to receded. And when I say value, it's like the intensity of the color itself is less as you go back. Again, a little more shadow area. You know, this would cast shadow just to give it more form. You know, this is all the same color. I would have, I just would have made it a little less intense. But the design and stuff, when you took this, I assume you took the photo, you know, there's a good compositional elements in this. So great effort too.
All right.
Photography.
Yes.
So here's a good example. Whose is this? Sorry. This is a good example of knowing the rules and knowing when to break the rules. So we've talked over and over about don't put anything right dead in the center. But she's got it in the center, but then it's offset. There's a little picture within the picture. And then this is offset. There's a whole little visual tension happening in here that makes that work. And this is creating a whole different dynamic. You've got diagonals going across here. So it's a rare instance where smacking it in the middle of the composition can work. Yeah, well done. This dark edge there makes the whole thing pop. It makes the whole thing sing. Because you have these beautiful blue grays and echoed back in here, a little different value, brighter back here. But that just frames the whole thing, that little accent there. I don't have any criticism for you.
Is that watercolor?
That's a photograph.
Ah, I'm gonna have to have got the textures of this stucco.
We have a lot of variety.
We're gonna do that one.
Oh, we wanted to, right, that one, sorry, wrong one.
It's caught on the top of the.
Yeah.
Oh, the, that was,
Don't touch it.
Maybe it looks like something that's space. They had a.
Whose piece is it? What, are you trying to achieve something? Just,
I was, it's a friend of mine who's an inventor at MIT, and I had done a very realistic portrait of him, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna do that.
it's really interesting, it's intriguing.
It's my thing.
To me, it's almost something out of a theater, you know, and the light that you often see in a theater, and usually in a darkened theater. You know, I mean, I do come here. I think we all focus in on faces, especially. I probably would have downplayed this red a little bit, made it a darker value. And I may have sort of darkened some of this area, not solidly, just somewhat. I would want this to come out more, the face coming out more. I mean, that's where I see this going. And likewise, this area, just softened it so that everything is, all of our attention is going to that one area. But these are supporting elements as well, so they are important. Don't think I'm downplaying that. And I like almost the electric quality of it. So, you know, if you wanted to play with your light a little more, as I said, you know, it reminds me of the theater and directed light. I would have put some highlight, some stronger white elements, but thinking of where you would want it to be emphasized. So I would have put a highlight here or there, but especially up here, maybe just at the top in these areas. But it's a nice piece, you know.
Can I make a quick comment? I love all the stuff going on here. There's so much interesting texture and subtlety there. This color here feels kind of foreign to me. Like it doesn't quite work. I would love to see this all with just black, white, and red for the whole composition, but that's just me. Yield back to. Photo.
yes.
And this is, who's this? Anything you want to tell me about it? No. Flat out, no. Okay, I can't see it with the glare, so I'm gonna have to move it out of your camera for a second so I can actually look at it. What is this structure?
It's a bridge,
Oh,
actually, that holds.
the whole thing is a... This is really hard to see with the glare. This is very nicely composed. It's a little too much the same value in the darks because it sort of just becomes little spots of light. It's harder to read. Compositionally, it's great. This is a really interesting thing, and the train moving toward it, it really is compelling. But that dark value just went too dark. It sort of swallows everything up.
Would you try to lighten it, or would you try to cut it off and crop it?
I wouldn't crop it because I really do think it's a strong composition. I think try working with the values. Try lightening it up. That would be mine take.
Let me see it, let us see that.
Let them look at it for a
sorry.
second because I took it away.
Okay.
Cool.
This is a sweet piece. Whose is it?
Mine.
Yeah. Nice. Do you usually do still life?
Not as much, yeah, this was kind of a rare,
Really? Okay.
I usually do landscapes,
And pastel?
pastel.
Okay. It's a nice piece. And you know, you chose your colors well. Again, the source of light, you know, you have to emphasize your shape. So this is not quite sitting as flat as I would like to. I know I could see a little bit of the reflection of the table into your chalk up here, your pastel. I would have thought more about the shape of your vase. And I would have hit some more highlights in, I don't know what kind of flowers these are, but, and then soften some of your edges as it recedes to the back. I mean, I see done it nicely here. We know it's in darkness. I would have just played around a little bit more with the values to give this more volume. You know, even in here, I think those are some green leaves, but I would have even sacrificed some of that for contrast. You know, it's not, as we all know, it's not always what's there. Nice that you made that nice and dark. You have anything? It's a nice piece.
I have a question about the saleability of those still lifes.
You know, I've been in business a very long time. Everything is saleable. You just need the right buyer to come into your gallery or studio. What's more important is that you love what you're doing. When I work on a piece, you know, yes, I get commissions and I just have to do it whether I like it or not. It's business. But if you're having a good time, that's what it's all about. You know, I've been in this business a long time, and it's just, I just love what I do. And You know, you're making art. You're making something nice in the world. Not everyone can say that. You know, nice piece.
How long have you had your gallery? I think I said, I saw something like over 40 years.
Yeah, 44 years.
That's amazing. I mean, I can't balance it with one hand, but.
And whose is this? Any particular things you're struggling with, or?
It's been a while since I've done a seascape. This has been plein air in the Bahamas.
Tough
I
job.
was really drawn to what's happening on the sandy areas. When we're down there, that turquoise water wants to take over everything.
Yeah.
In my mind, so. So it was a, you know, a battle. And there was a strong light coming from left to right. It was later in the afternoon, and I was trying to get some of the shadows in there without getting too busy.
Okay. Well, I can see that the thing that excited you most was that sand, because that's terrific. I love how you simplified things. You varied your brush strokes, but they're very concise and expressive. You're right. This water, it's too much. And I know when you're there, it looks like that. But for the sake of your painting, I would have lightened that.
Excuse me, if you look at the one above,
That's
it looks
funny.
dramatically different.
Well, yeah, that's more the value you would like to go for.
Yeah.
It would be more effective there. Yeah.
Like it is.
The tree is a little awkward. Compositionally, it's just kind of shoved off the edge there, and it's not really leading us in. It's just sort of distracting us. If you had broken that shape up a little so that you had maybe overhanging branches, some dangling, a little irregularity to that, that would have helped a lot. I'm not getting a sense of the light coming from left to right. I assume these are your shadows, but there's flat value on this tree, and that should be expressing some of that.
Yeah, there wasn't much happening with that tree.
Sometimes you gotta make it up. Gotta make a better tree than the tree that's there. But yeah, really, really I like the graphic quality of what you're doing there.
Yeah. Excuse me a moment. Yeah, there's a lot of glare. So, whose piece? Yes, sir.
This is a palette knife, obviously.
Yes.
And this is with Chinese oil paints that take forever to dry.
Uh-huh.
And my question was, I did it from a photograph, and there was sun shining in the very left-hand side, where that lighter green is, that was sunshine.
Yes.
And should I put the sunshine shining through, or is it okay?
So your sun was shining here, and then also
Yeah, over to the far left. Far left where that light green is.
up there.
Yeah.
See, it doesn't show, and
I'm
you know
saying,
this.
should I put it in?
Oh, you could have a little bit of it. I wouldn't flood that area with the light. I mean, you could handle this a lot of different ways. But I see this area as the focal point, you might say, and being let in there. So, yeah, you could have a little bit here and there. again, the painting itself, you all will see maybe later that that's a much darker value, that green, in this, in the actual painting. You know, I like your warmths in here. They're reddish, brownish, and they counteract some of the green. Here it gets a little muddy. You know, when you're playing with palette knife, you want to make sure it's not worked to the point where it just becomes blah. So you have a couple areas like that. And of course, if you're dealing with that kind of oil, you can just easily scrape it off if it's not working. Or after a while with palette knife, you could develop your skill whereby you could have any colors you want in that palette knife. You could just be laying them right over what's underneath. People can't believe that you could do that, but it works. And then you're manipulating your hand and that knife. Other than that, nice effort, and I want to walk in there.
All right, that's mine. I call this stillscape, so it's a still life in front of a landscape. And here's my problem. I'm thinking it got a little too heavy at the bottom, so that's what I'm wondering about.
By too heavy, you mean too dark?
Yeah,
Or-
yeah. But before it looked like it was floating a little.
Your table, yeah. The problem, I think, is the transition from here to here. There's no middle ground. You've got this beautiful, soft, grayed out background, and you've got this super strong, hard edge foreground, and there's nothing in between. There's not a lot of transition between this mountain shape and this, and that one goes back pretty well, but particularly those. So I would say more value here would help pull that together. Less value here. This value's fine, but it needs to fade a little to make that table lay flat and go back, and then give us a little more of a transition, more than 2 steps. But overall, very well rendered. This edge is wonky. I mean, you've done
It's supposed to be
such a beautiful job with
picnic
these
blanket.
ellipses.
It's what? It's supposed to be a picnic blanket.
A blanket. Oh, it's supposed to be on the ground?
Well, I guess so.
So then all the more that really, I was reading that as even just
But I see
a
what you're saying, yeah.
yeah, because this is floating.
Okay,
But
that's good,
yeah,
yeah.
the individual elements are beautifully painted. It's just a matter of making those value transitions work so it all pulls together.
That's helpful.
All right?
This caught my eye when I saw it earlier. Whose piece is this? And is there anything that you were looking for?
My wife and I go to the Housatonic River to fly fish every year
Yeah.
and do paintings.
Well, what I like most about it is that
Well, we both fish and then I take extra time.
you didn't bring any fish.
I turn them all loose.
We love fish. I bake a good fish. I wish I could see the better light, but I like this. what attracted me to it right away was the sense of light in it. I really like that aspect of it. I didn't quite get this part. I mean, I like the fact that the red is there, the orangey reds, but I didn't quite understand it fully. What was it?
It's Housatonic Fall is the title, and there was a bush there that had orange and yellow.
Really? Okay. So I probably would have put a dot dash of it somewhere else, because it looks like it's just that thing sitting right on top of there. However, it's a nice strong spot of color, and again the light in this whole thing, and you have a nice variety in your greens, and you know, some are warm, some are cool, obviously, and you've got the nice depth. You know, you have the reddish elements here that are contrasting very well with the green, you know, red and green, right? And, you know, it automatically turns it into almost a little bit of a grayish area, but you haven't gotten to that point. I like the fact that the background is light back here, because, you know, it tells me there's something going on back there, you know. So you have your planes. Nice that you neutralized the sky. And it's nice and loose. How long have you been painting?
35 years.
Shows. Nice piece.
He studied with Robert Douglas Hunter.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
It's really nice.
He was a nice guy, Robert Douglas.
Okay, who's this? And gouache?
Yes, I have a specific question.
Okay.
The shelf above the kitty
Mm-hmm.
on the left seemed kind of empty, so I thought I might put a little mouse. See the little mouse up above? That's on a piece of paper.
Oh, this mouse. I'm looking over here.
I don't know if I should put something there or not. That's other than that. I appreciate we have a comment.
So you're thinking this?
Yes. Is it too empty there?
No. I think that's it's so funny.
There you go.
How about the mouse?
Well, you know, cats will do that when there's something.
I like the mouse.
Yeah, it's just stretching.
You know, I was initially gonna say no, but it ties to the cat stretching. It pulls your eye. It pulls you through the painting, and the color is the same as that, which also pulls you back over here. It creates this nice little loop around, pulling you around the painting. I like this very much. I mean, very, very well composed, the way you've broken up that into these very graphic, geometric shapes. And, you know, not symmetrical spacing, really given some thought to how you're placing that, and nicely handled the light on the cat. Well done. I like the mouse.
We want the mouse.
Thumbs up on the mouse.
The vote for the mouse.
Whose piece? And
It's a really good vacation.
that's always a good thing to hear. So, overall, nicely done. I like the fact that most people won't attempt it, to show the rocks that are under the water. And then they fade out. Very good. I probably would have softened this line a little bit, you know, because it's water after all, and there's always some softness to that. You could also make it up sometimes where you have a little bit of sheen on the water in here, just a little stroke here and there, but I would have softened this line. I liked this mountain, nice go back. The composition is pretty good. When I originally saw it, the only thing I said, this is a little bit awkward, it's a little like nitpicky kind of thing. I would have made it a little more brushier. And I would have varied the greens. I would have had cooler green back here, even though it's lit, to bring this forward and make that recede. It's not a big deal. You know, you could do it. And your reflection here, the value of the greens are almost exactly the same. So this, I would have made a bit darker. You did it here. You should have done it here as well. You know, it's not a big deal to change that. Nice painting.
Whose is this? And anything you want to tell me?
Yes, I will tell you that this is from a painting that I had done before. It's a pastel. I had done a pastel painting that I didn't like. I liquefied it with clear gesso. So I had a new surface.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to get the angularity of the rocks, and I started off with a collage for my rocks, and then I added pastel on that. And the top half is pretty much left over from the underpainting that I didn't touch.
This stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have considered it finished because I framed it. I just like to fit it.
That's a giveaway.
And you can give me advice for the next iteration of it. I should do it again.
I really like what you're doing with all these textures and the variation that you're getting in there. You know, this stuff, because it's kind of broken up and almost little sparks of white, it conveys water. You know, the angularity of the rocks, you're not trying to draw each and every rock, but it feels like rocks. This sort of subtle stuff feels like distant trees. I think this is working pretty dang well.
Thank you.
It feels like there needs to be a little more visual tension here. This sort of is wrapping around this, and this becomes a little static. Maybe a little blue, just a tiny amount over in here somewhere would help.
Okay.
Kind of the same way with the mouse and the flower pot. Kind of your eye will bounce to those things and connect those things to help it move around a little more. So yeah, I would think just trying to find that visual tension with the color a little bit.
Before we do this one, does anybody, have we not hit one of your paintings that you brought? Because we got a little confused. All right, so everybody's had at least one. Okay, this will be the last one then.
Whose piece is this? Housatonic River?
No. Why not? Okay.
It's a nice piece you've been painting a while as well. Anything I should know?
Just like your thoughts on how to make it better, I think maybe some of the colors in the background are a little intense.
True, you know, you worked on the foreground quite a bit. Well, I know you worked in the background quite a bit too, but there's a nice transition. It's well defined and yet soft. It's kind of nice because of that. I like your, you know, your water quality, your reflection. I think that I would have softened the greens back here a little bit and maybe kept this a little cooler. You know, so your foreground trees would still have that warmth. In the background, a little bit cooler. You certainly have intense reds in here. Yeah, I would have softened them. I like this soft quality, for instance. I would have softened the red a little bit. And you know, you would play with it and because you want to get to that background. And you do have the distance in here because you've achieved it with the paint. It's just to have it more successful and believable, you would have it a little cooler back there and play down maybe a little grayed out. Susan?
I agree with all of that. Something that's catching my eye. This is really beautifully painted in the foreground. I would like to see you be a little more intentional about how you're placing this to give us a lead in, to really create sort of a path, a visual path for your eye to follow into that. Because, you know, that may be where those lily pads really were, but you can rearrange those to make a better painting out of it. Yeah, so just, you know, maybe eliminate some or just create a pattern that connects to these smaller ones off in the distance. Irregular, not too contrived if possible. Other than that, I agree with
Amy is on the cover of our brochure.
Oh, nice.
For painting, that is. But,
All right, well, that was it.
thank you to Susan and John.
And we get booted out of here at 9 o'clock. So festivities must come to an end. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for bringing your paintings.